So can I ask you questions too? Is that
100%. Yep.
Well, my big question is why are you doing these?
What's your money? You know,
what's that?
For the money.
The money, yeah. Okay, I'll just let it go at that then.
The money and the fame, yeah. Okay, man, today's an exciting day for a couple of reasons. The first of which, finally, book number 2, which if you read it, you'll hear the story of how book number 2 was supposed to be book number 1, but I don't yet have my author copies yet in. I've been sending out some of these postcards, but Be Intentional Culture, How the Small Things Enhance or Undermine Your Culture, written by, check out this list of contributors: Luke Drager, Lisa Lavender, Andrew G. McCabe, Dr. Leroy Nunnery II, Jonathan Isaacson, Elon Posmanic, David Princeton, Chris Stanley, Jeremy Watkin, and contributions from many others. Maybe some of you listening. Introduction by Michelle Blevins. I say contributions by many others. I believe it's chapter 18. I weave a story or a series of articles that I wrote in with inserts from people that I reached out to that contributed their thoughts on culture as well. And so there's some really good stories. This is about developing a thriving culture. Taking care of your culture is critical to taking care of your people. Taking care of your people is essential to taking care of your customers. And taking care of your customers, of course, is the foundation of a sustainable business. So this book is available in Kindle and finally in paperback.
I can't do it. I can't do it, Squidward.
Again, how do the small things that you do contribute to enhancing or undermining your culture? DYOJO.com/book 2, Amazon. If you have the link for the first book, Be Intentional Estimating, then you'll see that it's part of the series, the Be Intentional series. So really excited to have that out. The second thing I'm excited about is we landed a big fish. We landed, Pete Consigli wrote an article. Boy, that was back in 2007, March of 2007 for Cleaning and Restoration magazine, the magazine of RIA. And he introduced the concept of the founding fathers of restoration. So if we had a Mount Rushmore of founders, that doesn't exclude innovators and people that have contributed to the industry, but if you were putting together a compendium of the founding fathers, he had Martin King, number 1, Lloyd Weaver, number 2, Cliff Zlotnick of IAQ Radio, number 3, also Unsmoken, and many others. And then Claude Blackburn, founding father number 4, the founder of Dri Eaz. So I'm going to introduce him shortly as we get ready to bring him on. I wanted to talk a little bit about reading. I've made a goal to do more reading this year, more intentionally, and as I've been doing my research on history of the industry, I've been finding more books. Some of them are hard to get a hold of. Last week we talked to Ken Larson, an industry legend that wrote Leadership in Restorative Drying, and talk about a book that if you want an exhaustive knowledge of approaching mitigation the right way, that's what he's put together. And so that was a great conversation. But I want to talk and that he said he's sending me a copy, still available if you reach out to the DYOJO through our contact page, 40% off for Leadership in Restorative Drying by Ken Larson. So I want to talk about this book. Albert Erzman's going to be a guest on February 11th, live at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. The Service Master Story, navigating tension between people and profit. Some of you know I got my start in Service Master, so this was of interest to me. But the founder, Marion and Wade, have this great quote that I've shared before. Don't expect to build a super company with super people. You must build a great company with ordinary people. And so the two concepts that come out of this book, and I would encourage, if you are in the process of trying to figure out how to build your company based on values, I believe that was episode 22 with Lex Cisney. We talked about growing without losing your values, your vision and your values. This is a great book on how Service Master, the early people in a position of leadership, kind of flesh that out. And Al brings out two concepts. Number one, the shingles, where each layer of leadership, new incoming leadership, was complementary, and recognizing the shingles that have been laid before and the new shingles and working together. But they also had this real unique, basically I think everybody that came into leadership worked 6 weeks in the field on the product. And Wade's first hire of Ken Hansen, guy was a pastor, so aligned with values, but also Wade saw in him some financial acumen. And so talking about that second part of it, understanding the value of working in the field.
I need your help. I can't tell you what it is. You can never ask me about it later, and we're gonna hurt some people.
Whose car are we gonna take?
Marion was a little rough around the edges. You start to learn the business by going out on production jobs. Then you can move into sales. This experience will equip you for real leadership. After that, you can step in where you are needed most. So bringing a high-level guy in, but before he unleashes them into his leadership roles and responsibilities, having him go out in the production field, learn it from the ground up, and experience it. I can't remember the fellow's name, but there's someone in there, and they're on their hands and knees, scrubbing, and he's like, hi, good morning. Nobody even recognized him, and one of his wife's friends comes in and is like, what are you doing now? And, I thought you got a good job, and he's like, I have an MBA. So really cool. So I'm going to save for the closing. I'm going to talk about one of our other guests coming up. But let me introduce again a man who should need no introduction. If you are in the property restoration industry, I strongly recommend that article is available from Pete Consigli. I mentioned it in my own article with Ed Cross doing an overview of the history, but the 4 Faces on Mount Restoration, Taking the Best of the Past to Build for the Future by Pete Consigli. So these are names you should know. I think it's important to understand the history of where we've come from. Also, I do try IAQ Radio, again, the OGs. They've been doing podcasts before podcast was even a thing, live radio. They still do live every Friday. Cliff, the Z-Man, Zlotnick, and Ken Radio Hughes. So IAQ Radio episode 473, which is a replay of episode 177, they titled that one From Humble Beginning to Raging Success, a Candid Conversation with the Dri Eaz Products Founders. So if you have D-Hughes and air movers, you probably know the Dri Eaz name, but Claude Blackburn. So they go into greater depth about his coming up in the industry and those kinds of things. One thing I really wanted to pull out of, and I encourage you, if you are in a position of leadership, listening to, Claude talks about sharing with people, the willingness to really share. I'm quoting from the IAQ Radio website. Profit sharing. We always had gross revenue sharing. The company grew from $160K in gross sales to $50 million, but I was the only person responsible for profit. While we grew like crazy, we didn't make much profit. I decided to share the financials with the company associates openly and with integrity. Every quarter, the associates would receive a check. That decision made me the most money of anything I ever did. Most other business owners are afraid to share the financials. I made more money in the 5 years after implementation than in all the years before. We actually talked about this with Skylar Lewis, Superior Restoration in California, and he mentioned the same thing.
There you go.
Thank you, sir.
There you go. There you go. There you go.
Making the financials transparent and assigning people a line on the profit and loss statement, and then sharing in both the responsibility of understanding where those numbers come from, and then the value of profit when it comes through. So really good. It's a great interview with Claude, much better than mine. So I would encourage you to, again, IAQ Radio episode 473 would be the easiest one to find. But yeah, I mean, you heard right. Like, Claude took Dri Eaz from, those of you that know those little foam squares that you put under furniture after carpet cleaning. You know, he's selling those for $27 a piece, you know, and shipping those all over the place, and in, you know, from his house, and then when he sold Dri Eaz in 2006, it had almost 200 employees, 150 distributors, and sales of over 50 million. So Claude knows, you know, what's the farmer's statement? We know a thing or two because we've seen a thing or two. He talked about in that interview on IAQ, the 51% rule is like, as long as I was right 51% of the time, we could stay alive. So I was really excited to, Claude's from my neck of the woods in the Northwest. And so this is a great, I enjoyed this conversation immensely that Claude would come on and share his insights with us. So let's get after it. There we go.
I'm not a regular Zoom guy.
You're retired now, right? So you don't have to be in and all that.
Yeah. I've used a lot of tech in my life, but it was 1980s and 90s tech.
Yeah. I think on Facebook you posted you were flying around the San Juan. So today, are you grounded or are you going back out?
Well, it's raining. It's raining all week, so I probably won't be going. But I do try to get up when it's nice and clear and comfortable. It's just for fun flying. I fly around the San Juan Islands quite a bit and go out for a hamburger or whatever.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah. So can I ask you questions too? Is that
100%. Yep.
Well, my big question is why are you doing these? What's your
money? You know,
what's that?
For the money.
The money. Yeah. Okay. I'll just let it go at that then.
The money and the fame. Yeah. Well, it actually started as so Restoration and Remediation Magazine. I've written articles for them. Mel said, "Hey, if you post videos, it might help get more readers. Not as many people read nowadays, you know."
Yeah, right.
And then when the first shutdown happened, I wanted to reach out. I started doing a couple videos. I called them 3 Questions with a Pro, and reached out to a few people, try to get a few perspectives outside of our industry. And then there's a real neat guy, Jarrett Steer, that does a podcast. And I just asked him, what do you use? I found out basically I could take the audio from the video and just post it as a podcast as well. And so it kind of grew. So,
okay. So you've been doing this for a while now.
Yeah, I think I started the videos maybe in February. So yeah, real seasoned. Yeah.
Well, that's cool. That's cool. Good for you.
Yeah. So yeah. So yep, that's my real exciting origin story. So.
My God. Oh my God.
Well, I'm excited. As excited as I get anyway.
I'm so freaking excited.
Yeah. Well, and that's I like I said in the questions, heard you on the IAQ radio, and have been kind of digging into little pieces of history, and obviously you pop up quite a bit. So,
Oh, that's,
people may have heard of this little company, Dri Eaz, right? So,
yeah, I suppose I run into carpet cleaners and restorers who heard of it before.
yeah. Well, that's what I was hoping to. I think it's important we remember history. Like what's the saying? If those who don't know their history are doomed to repeat it. So,
Right, right.
so well, let's I guess you in addition to flying, you also like pickleball, huh? I found that article where you are working on. You would like to see pickleball become an Olympic sport. To accomplish that, we must attract and retain younger players. I see a future where pickleball is regularly taught beginning in grade school through junior high and high school. So you've got a passion for it, and then you put a lot of effort behind actually making that happen.
Yeah, well, I started playing, well, in school, I never played any sports because I started working Friday and Saturday nights. And so I slept a good part of Saturday mornings and Sunday mornings. And so I didn't really do any sports. And then I got married young and started businesses. So I never really did sports before. But once I retired and I started traveling, we actually had a motorhome at one point, and so had our motorhome in Indio, California, which is near Palm Springs.
Okay.
And people were out there playing, and we're like curious about this thing. We just stopped by one day, and they said, "Oh, you can play," because everybody was really outgoing, and these are a bunch of retired people, right?
Yep.
And they wanted more players, and so having never played anything, really.
Yeah.
My wife and I, picked up a paddle and started hitting the ball. And of course, they're very complimentary. They make you sound like a hero when you hit the ball.
Yep.
So, wow, I could really be good at this. I'm going to be a champion. And so then we bought a place in San Diego. So we wintered in San Diego.
Oh, nice.
And so I wanted something to do active, and it's just really a lot of fun to play because have you played pickleball?
I'm trying to remember. So racquetball, they're all variations of similar things, right?
Yeah, they're kind of similar, but they each have their own rules and they each have their own things.
So what's the paddle and the ball in pickleball?
It's like a ping pong paddle, but about twice as large.
Okay.
And the ball is a wiffle ball.
Okay.
It's about and it's hollow.
Yep.
And it's kind of a cross between tennis, ping pong, and racquetball, I guess.
And martial arts, right?
Yeah. Yeah, martial arts. Yeah.
Can you play on a tennis court, like a modified tennis court?
Yeah, we draw new lines on tennis courts. You can actually get 2 or 3 courts and that's one of the advantages. Out of a tennis court, you can actually convert those tennis courts, which are unused. There's thousands and thousands of these tennis courts that are just moldy and nobody hardly shows up to play.
Sorry about that, dude.
It's okay. He's a new member. Whoa, boy.
Because in the 70s, there was such a huge growth of tennis. So we're trying to convert a lot of those tennis courts. It's not the easiest thing in the world to do, but try to convert a lot of those tennis courts or just building brand new pickleball courts.
Right.
But it was such a joy to play. And so we played in San Diego, and I would drive. There was about 10 places to play in San Diego, and I would drive around and play. And then I started playing in Bellingham. So that's where we live now. Bellingham is our main home.
And then you're helping, like you said, in the local area, modify courts and try to.
Yeah, so it became kind of a mission. I wrote kind of a mission and vision for myself personally, because I do a lot of philanthropy. Since I sold my business, I've given a lot of money away. But a lot of it's not rewarding. You don't really see the results. You don't have a way of measuring the results. You're not participatory. And so I'm gravitating more and more towards making my philanthropy efforts in either Whatcom County, which is Bellingham, or Skagit County, which is where I ran my businesses for 40 some years, and where I lived for 40 some years. And Skagit County is kind of a depressed area. So when I'm given the option, I tend to want to support Skagit County even a little more than Whatcom County, where I live now, because it's just always been kind of a poor county.
higher.
And so yeah, I made it a mission to build one pickleball pavilion in Bellingham and one in Mount Vernon, and also to convert a number of tennis courts to pickleball courts.
Yeah.
And to build new pickleball courts where they arise.
Nice.
It's a lot tougher than I thought, because these tennis courts are owned by, the Parks Department,
Okay.
cities, and they have their own bureaucracy, and they have their own they have their own concerns, and so just because you think, well, if you offer somebody $1.5 million, I mean, they're going to be
Right.
all over that, right? Because the way I was raised, I'd be all over for $50.
Yeah.
So it's been an eye opener to find out that government doesn't work at the same pace as individuals, motivated individuals, or small
Yeah.
businesses.
Even if you're going to do all the work, provide all the money.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. I'm constantly surprised. So even getting a return phone call, it's like, okay, I'm going to give you $1.5 million, and you won't return my phone call. It's like, because that doesn't really matter. What seems to matter to people is job security.
Yeah.
Don't take risks, because
Yeah.
you might get in trouble. And so I think there's very little inclination towards risk taking, which I think occurs in business as well, right? Some businesses, if they're not operated properly, you make a mistake and you get killed for it. So why would you stick your neck out?
Well, yeah, we talk about that a lot with coaches, right? Like you want to be innovative, but if you're too innovative, you'll outcast. Whereas you can be a status quo person and, like you said, keep your job. Well, they did it the right way.
Yeah.
What's so odd in your scenario, though, is there's, like you said, there's these vacant tennis courts, and you're not only going to refurbish something, but perhaps bring some use to it. And I don't know, what would the community? Well, we don't want our tennis courts to go away that we never use.
Well, right. And we had that situation. We play at Cornwall Park here in Bellingham. We had that situation where you have 100 people that want to play pickleball, but we wanted to convert them over we wanted to convert some tennis courts, and they got a couple of complaints from tennis players.
Oh.
I mean, we've never even seen these people.
Yeah.
And the complaints had more weight than the vision.
Weird.
Right? You really hear that complaint if you're a public official, I think. And maybe you don't see the vision as being that beneficial. I don't know. It's
pickleball guys, they've got a bad reputation. I mean, Well,
Hell's Angels.
I don't want to repeat what I've heard, but.
Oh, really? Yeah. Well, Hell's Angels and pickleball players, they're right on the same track. I mean, it's the same age group, right? They're like 65.
Burrito is delicious, but it is filling.
I'd probably feel safer in a grocery store with the Hell's Angels. I'm just saying that.
So. Yeah. You're right. I never really thought of it that way, but I knew I was going to get something out of this today. Yeah.
Well, you got to probably change the image of pickleball players, and maybe the jackets would help,
Maybe a new dress code would be good. Or maybe some earrings or something like that. And those ear expansion units that what do you call those?
Okay. So next time you're on the podcast, you're gonna have gauges then?
Well, I'm not going to promise, but I'm going to think about it, and I'm a pretty slow thinker. So, yeah.
Well, maybe we can get a what is that, the group together that reviews and sees how it would be perceived by the public, right?
Oh yeah, we could do that.
Yeah. Okay. We'll get to work on that. If anybody wants to volunteer, Claude needs some help. Rebranding pickleball players. So.
Yeah, a focus group. I think that's what a focus group.
He's putting on his third presentation tomorrow for us. It's the end of the year. We'll probably have 20 guys here, I would imagine. And we're going to have a mix of probably owners, licensed guys that are employees, We're gonna have some new construction guys, some remodel guys, but I would imagine we'll have at least a handful, maybe half the room would be service guys.
Yeah.
And we just get them in our doors. They get to see our facility.
Yeah.
We talk to them about our referral fee program. We also do a big giveaway, like every 6 months. We're giving a four-wheeler right now.
Oh, dang.
So for every time they refer us a water damage job, they get entered to win the four-wheeler. So come May, we'll do a drawing, and one of these guys will walk out with a four-wheeler. This is the fifth one that we give away.
Dang.
We try to educate them on our services. You know what we do as far as water damage, our ratings, our reviews, the fact that we're not a program vendor, that we work for the client, not the carrier. And we've gone so far. Let me grab one of these. We started putting together this little Dickies bag here,
Okay.
and I've got a little $20 moisture meter in here,
Oh, okay.
general moisture meter, and we show them how to use it.
Yeah.
And we put a little notepad in here as well that basically says what your content should be. And the plumber can then write in what your content actually is. So if there's wet materials, they can fill all that out, put their name at the bottom, leave it with the homeowner. And the homeowner give us a call. We'll come out and do a little free assessment. That's been working pretty good for us.
Wow. That's, yeah, just simple stuff. Well, I like your idea, right? Like realtors maybe get a big turnout, but we're not really getting the bang for the buck. And then whereas I'd much rather spend, you know, a lot more money on a small room of plumbers that's going to turn into something, right? So
Absolutely.
that's really smart. I'm assuming you feed them too. You guys probably pretty good at putting something together.
Yeah, absolutely. We actually do free lunches for them every Friday.
Oh,
Yeah, and then they make you drive them to church the next morning. Like, gas ain't free.
okay.
That's when we hand out our referral fees, is during the free lunch Fridays, and the guys come. It was big before COVID hit. Now we're trying to rebuild it, but it'll be a bit of a process, I would imagine.
Yeah.
It's a lot of money, okay? But we need money coming in every week. We need jobs. Wouldn't you rather a fishing pole than a fish?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
you in past articles and on like IAQ radio, I think Cliff and Joe did a great job. You guys kind of dug into your history, so I don't want to go too far into that. I'd really rather point people to listening to that because you all touched on that. You did a real great job with that. But if I remember correctly, so you're about 11 years old. You mentioned, you know, working on the weekends and those kinds of things. Left home around 16, dropped out. And do I have this correctly? Would you describe yourself as an introvert? Or you were introverted at the time?
I usually do. Yeah. I'm the only guy to ever drop out of Toastmasters because I was too afraid to talk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so how then do you be introverted, high school dropout, and then go get into the heavy door-to-door sales work of carpet cleaning? And maybe just touch on, like, for people that don't understand, carpet cleaning is now an industry, right? It's a whole thing. But at the time when you were doing it, it still wasn't quite developed, right?
Yeah, right. It was just in the late 60s that wall-to-wall carpet started coming in. And by the 70s, by the early 70s, you had carpet in every room in the house,
Everywhere.
including in the kitchen and the bathroom. So it was a new industry. And at that time, in the late 60s, what people were doing is they'd bring in rotary scrubbers and they were scrubbing the carpet. And then, of course, the portable steam machine came out and the truck. And there was lots of innovation going on with carpet cleaning back. And when I got in, I bought the second driveline truck mount in the world. I mean, Hydromaster was in Linwood, and the second company was Steamback Company. They innovated the driveline. Hydromaster was innovating the slide-in unit at that time. And even before that, they were portable. So, you know, Mr. Steam and VaporVac and all these different companies.
They're like two-man units, right? You had the two guys.
Yeah. The VaporVacs were stainless steel. They were built like tanks, and they weighed about 180 pounds and had 4 big casters on them.
Yeah.
So how do you go from being introverted to knocking on doors? Well, when I moved to Mount Vernon, I mean, literally, we were hungry. I had gotten off of, at that time, they called it welfare when I moved up here. I had a dry foam machine and a vacuum cleaner that was given to me on credit. In other words, the credit was pay me when you can from a Zep salesman. And I had a car that was given me. And I mean, it was not easy, but nevertheless, I had one child and soon another on the way.
So you're like 19, 20?
Yeah, I was 19. October, actually in October of 1970, I would have been, I guess I was 19. Yeah, 19. But, and so I was hell bent on starting a carpet cleaning business, and I didn't have any money. I mean, even the guy that gave me a house, he let me rent the house for $23. Wow. And it was $115 a month. So I had no first, no last. Yeah. And when he asked me how much money I had, I said, well, I got $35. He says, oh, that's perfect. I just need $23. Right? Well, how come you just need $23? It's an odd number to me.
Yeah.
And he said, well, that's 1/5 of the first month's rent. So people helped me out, things like that, because I would tell them my story. Yeah. And then they would And so, the only way I could get business really was by knocking on doors. Yeah. And when I got enough money, I bought these door hangers. I don't know people, but you probably don't know, but in the 1970s, the housewife was home.
Yep.
I mean, I would say, I'm guessing, but in Skagit County, which is a rural community, it's probably 90%. So you could knock on the door, literally. Yeah. And the husband was at work and the housewife was at home. And so I would knock on doors and talk to them, or in some cases, just hang a door hanger. Yeah. And the door hanger talked about my carpet cleaning business. And if they answered the door, then I'd offer to clean their carpets. And if they wouldn't do that, I'd offer to wash their windows. And finally, as a last resort, I'd offer to pick their weeds. I mean, I'd do almost anything I could, just trying to stay alive, because at that time I had zero support. So there was, so the other reason that you do things like that seem a little crazy is that if you have no back door, I mean, most people in life, they always have a back door. They have their parents, or they have their friends, or today they have a social structure that offers all kinds of security blanket. So you're not going to go hungry. They say that people go hungry in this country today, but I don't understand that, with all of the social services and everything else. And I've given money to food banks and stuff like that. But anyway, in those days, there was no back door. There was a little grocery store that would let me sign for food, and I could sign for food and stuff.
Like an IOU? Yeah,
you pay them when you got the money. And so, that was a big driver. So how do you get business and you don't have any money, but you got a car, you got a vacuum cleaner and a dry foam machine, and instantly you just go out and knock on doors.
Maybe you can speak to this, but so it was dry foam, right? And then steam cleaning was quite a kerfuffle, right? I mean, a lot of people were resistant to it. Yeah. And then what ChemDry kind of brought back the dry foam cleaning,
Well, that was later. That was later. So
like it goes like this. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I never dry foam carpets for more than a year. It was an advanced commercial machine.
Sure.
You kind of walked behind it, had revolving brushes, a 5-gallon tank built into it. And it didn't do a good job at all. And very soon afterwards, I heard, and I would do everything I could but these carpets in the 70s, I don't think people have any idea. They were filthy. In other words, they had never been properly cleaned. And even the belief was if you had them cleaned, they would get dirty quicker. I mean, a gold carpet was black. I mean, it was, so you couldn't get these things clean with any kind of shampoo or dry foam or anything else. And soon after, I discovered steam cleaning, and I bought a Mr. Steam portable steam cleaner with a single stage lamp, and started steam cleaning. And that was magical. I mean, absolutely. And of course, we came up with this 5-step process, blah, 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 vacuum the hell out of it and shampoo it. I had a rotary shampooer within a year, and then use this portable, and then use a groomer or something to put and then put down traffic paper. That was kind of a 5-step process back then. And we could get we did a much better job. And then within a year after that, I bought the second driveline truck mount. So, and they even loaned me their prototype, which was
Wow.
a crazy thing, but they loaned it to me for like 6 months.
Wow.
And I got to use that. And then, so I bought a 1974 Dodge. So it wasn't maybe just a year. It was a 1974 Dodge with a built-in steam vac unit, driveline system.
Wow.
With a 100-gallon tank, 100-gallon water tank, and for $12,700. And there'd only been, and it was the second one ever produced.
Well, that's big money. I mean, that's still pretty big money today, but that would be even bigger money back then, right?
Oh, it was huge money. In fact,
Yeah.
there's no way. I went to the bank and they just said, "Oh no, we're not going to give you any money." And then the salesman, Bud Nasseth, I think, from Steamback, and his partner came up and sat down with me in the bank, and I told my story again. And the bank literally wrote the forms out with misleading information to give me the loan.
Oh.
I mean, they never do that today.
Yeah.
But they inflated everything. They say, "Well, how much money do you make?" And this and that. And I tell the numbers. And then when I saw the numbers they were writing down, I'm going, "Wow, that's not what I said at all."
Well, you say they'd never do that, but I think we've got a couple of recent issues that show
Maybe.
Otherwise.
Yeah, but I got that truck mount anyway. It was a huge benefit because we could really get carpets clean.
Yeah.
For the first time.
Well, and I think you mentioned in there, you went to a seminar from Lloyd Weaver, saw his porta dryer. I think it was when Lloyd came out to the Northwest, right? He's definitely somebody that pops up in history. Do you remember much about the seminar and Lloyd's process?
Yeah, not very much. I mean, Lloyd, I could relate to Lloyd because he's blue collar.
Yeah.
He was just your average Joe. He was rough around the edges. He was rough all the way through. And he charged, and I've been going to a lot of seminars because I didn't have much education. I'd sign up for these $59. At that time, there was a dozen companies where you could go to these one-day seminars on every subject you could imagine. So I took those all in, $59. So I'm going, and so I took all those seminars, and Lloyd was charging $250.
Wow.
Back in 1975 or something, 4 or 5 in that range. And I went to a seminar. It basically just stood up there and talked to everybody. And he made jokes. He was a down to earth kind of guy. And I bought a couple of air movers from him and a sensor. I think he had a sensor at that time. And I started doing water damage restoration. And
so now the carpet cleaning business adapts into water damage to some.
Well, it was perfect because it was carpet cleaners really suffered in those days, and so a lot of them would go out of business in the wintertime because it was kind of like the housewife believed in spring cleaning and fall cleaning.
Yeah,
and that was serious business to them. I mean, the whole house would get cleaned, in the spring and the fall. Well, I was a residential carpet cleaner, and thousands of other carpet cleaners in this burgeoning industry were also residential carpet cleaners. So they did pretty good in the spring and through the summer and into the fall. But once it started to rain or get really cold or the Christmas trees went up or whatever, that was the end of carpet cleaning.
Yeah.
So these guys were going out of business. I once bought a list back in the, I think it was 24,000 SIC code 7217 carpet cleaners. And I made a serious mistake. I put return postage guaranteed. And it cost you 25 cents to get them back. It was crazy. Well, I got about 20% of these mailings back. And that's when whether I made up the story or not, some of them were just a bad list. Now I realize that some of them were just duplicates or bad lists or whatever. But in my own mind at that time, I said 20% of our industry is going out of business every year.
Yeah.
And well, what can we do about this? And water damage helped me. And within a few years, it became 50% of my net income.
Yeah.
So almost all residential. And so it wasn't 50% of my gross sales, but I made so much more money on water damage restoration.
Right.
So
being able to set the equipment and have it make money while you're doing other things, right?
Yeah, even then it was $12 a day for an air move or something like that back in 1975.
Yeah.
So, but Lloyd, I don't really remember too much. I mean, I could tell you a few stories about Lloyd because because once I got into the business, he was very aggressive. I mean, one time he was going to beat me up.
Well, you
And,
eventually became his competition, basically, right?
yeah, I mean, a few years later, but really I bought a couple of pieces of equipment, went to a seminar, and I never had any dealings with Lloyd after that. I mean, he wasn't like a mentor or a person I talked with, or, I mean, I would see him at the trade shows because I was attending the Carpet Cleaners Institute of the Northwest at that time.
Yeah.
You know, I'd see him around, and but I never was really, he wasn't my buddy or anything.
Yeah. So you guys ever put the boxing gloves on and do that at an industry show?
Yeah, well, in Vancouver, Washington, we had a Carpet Cleaners Institute meeting up there. In those days, those were pretty serious. I mean, we might have, 100, 150 companies come to something like that. We'd have big exhibits. For me as a greenhorn, it was a huge thing, and but I had brought out my first air movers. So that was, and he came over to me. He was so pissed. So he had a bit of a temper. He was so pissed. He says, "You copied my color." And I'm going, "Copied your color? What? You got it?" And he grabs me by starts shaking me like I'm kind of a nonviolent person. And it was a good thing he did, because it made me mad is what it did. It made me embarrassed. It was in front of everybody,
Yeah.
And I didn't copy his color intentionally. I just they only had 8 colors of Imran paint, and I was using a super quality 2-part paint back in those days. It was the most expensive paint that money could buy. And my metal, I was making metal dryers.
Yep.
And so they only had 8 colors. They had a light blue and a dark blue. I picked one of them. But anyway, he made me mad enough, and I was young enough. That was a mistake on his part, because I was going to get even. I was going to show him what's what. And of course, I would have never been able to show him what's what with a metal air mover. I made 10 units the first year. And I'd been selling easy blocks since the late 70s out of my garage. And then you say, well, what else can I do? I mean, somebody's going to knock off my blocks pretty soon. I gotta have something else. And I wrote the Carpet Cleaner's Guide to Water Damage Restoration, which I actually have a revised version, but this is the first book I wrote.
That's one of the original copies?
Yeah. Well, this is a slightly revised version.
Sure.
But, and since then, Dri Eaz, of course, has done lots of things.
Wow.
But we wrote the restorative guide to the book of restorative drawing, which is 470 pages, which was huge. I spent a whole year on that project. Where was I going with this? I forgot where I was.
Your metal dryers. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So what else can we sell besides easy blocks? And then just I sent a mailing off to every carpet cleaner in the United States with my easy blocks on one side of the order form, and the book on the other side. And then the next, so I sold thousands of those books. I mean, thousands of them. And a lot of people would give me credit for getting them into the business because of the book. I mean, they would come to my seminars later, they would buy our equipment, they would do all this other stuff. But I got a lot of, and I didn't know it. I didn't know I was kind of this guy, that everybody looked up to. But that helped a lot of people make money. But anyway, the next time I did a mailing, because these mailings were very expensive, because I was doing like a 24,000 mailing at that time. And that's how you reach people. It was the only way to reach people, right? Way of magazine advertising or direct mail. And so what else do we know anything about? The only thing I know anything about is water damage restoration. And I made a run of 10 metal air movers. And they weren't copies of Lloyd's. They were a little different. And I tried to make them better. Of course, you try to improve. And I sent off a 24,000 mailing and sold like 4 of them. It's like, in other words,
popular item, huh? Yeah.
It was a total bust. Yeah. And when Lloyd actually shook me up like that, I was going to give it up. I figured I had no chance. They were buying Lloyd's porta dryers and stuff. I mean, why would they buy something from me? I mean, they love my blocks. I mean, I was opening the mailbox and getting
what were his original porta dryers like the snail fan that we know today, or
no, they were metal. So you go to WWA Grangers, you buy a HVAC blower, quarter horse, third horse, half horse, whatever, and that comes with a wheel. So it comes with a 9.5, 10 5/8, blah blah blah. And so he had, and then you go to a sheet metal shop and you have them make the outside. And of course, it's rectangular because it's sheet metal. So it has straight lines. No, we came out with the first snail-shaped, it was fiberglass, hand-laid fiberglass, dryer in the world. And that came by accident, like soon after that incident with Lloyd. That came fairly soon after that, within 6 months. Because I kind of decided, look, if I'm going to spend, whatever it was I spent, say 30 cents a mailing, thousands of dollars, which was like my whole net worth doing mailings, then and I only sell 4 of these.
Yeah.
That's a bust,
So you were ready to call it quits and just
I was done.
Then,
And even that wouldn't have done it because I didn't have a better idea. And but the better idea came in the form of a fiberglass, hand-laid fiberglass mold. And I have to give credit to somebody else for that. A guy walked in, he was an old guy, he's like 40, and we started talking, and he wanted a job carpet cleaning. And what he was an alcoholic. He'd hit bottom, he quit drinking, but nobody would give him a job.
Yeah.
And so he was just looking for any kind of work to take care of his family. And his name was Harlan Wright. And I'm like looking at this old guy, and he's overweight, and everything.
Yeah.
And I'm going, I don't
the prototype, right?
I don't think he can clean carpets. And on the way out, he looked at one of my dryers. I had it sitting in my little carpet cleaning business, and metal dryer. And he said, "What's that?" I said, "Blah, blah, blah." And this is how it works. And it goes underneath the carpet, does this and that. And he says, I can make a tool and make that out of fiberglass. And I said, you could? And so we worked together, but he did the real work. But I knew the industry and I knew how.
Yeah.
And we came out with the first fiberglass plastic air mover in the world at that time. That would have been, I don't know what year it was, but it was, 80, 82,
80s.
83 or in that area. But one thing that really sticks out in my mind when we were negotiating it, he said, I said, well, how much do you think you're worth to get paid doing this? And he says $10 an hour. And I still remember looking at him and going, well, that's what I get paid. Because I would pay myself, like a regular business, And so I paid him $10 an hour, and he made the first fiberglass mold. He made the second fiberglass mold.
Wow.
One time we were one of the biggest laminators in Skagit County.
Oh, dang.
Oh, we did tons of this stuff.
Yeah.
And it was terrible. We got an order from U-Haul Corporation for 2,200. So we got into the rental industry too.
Okay.
And we tried to merge the carpet cleaning industry that didn't have enough air movers with the rental industry, who had, they were good business people. They had money, they could buy stuff. And we merged those two industries together. And we got an order from U-Haul Corporation for 2,200 units.
Holy cow.
And these units took 4 man-hours each to build. They were hand built with little rollers,
Yeah.
It was crazy. And when we were going through that, I'm going, we can't keep doing this. And soon after, we were able to buy our first rotational molding machine.
Wow.
Plastic, rotational molding machine. So we had to redesign, basically.
So U-Haul used to rent drying equipment and tools and things?
Oh, yeah. They got in this, and they spent, I couldn't quote the numbers, hundreds of millions, 500 million, $800 million. And they opened up branches. Well, they bought 2,200 units, for example, because they wanted 2 turbo dryers in each store.
Wow.
So they had 1,100 outlets that they either had opened or were opening. And they bought stuff. They never even saw my product. I never met them. Wow. I got a phone call saying how much. I didn't know how much. I go $179 each. And the next thing I know, I got a purchase order for 22. The biggest order I'd ever gotten in my life was like for 10.
Yeah.
The biggest single order.
Yeah.
I mean, I had lots of guys that were buying 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, that kind of thing, and they buy 1 and come back 6 months later and buy 2 more. And then they come back 6 months later and buy 6.
Yeah.
But, those guys that bought 1 ended up with 100 units, down the road. But anyway, so that was a big order, and that was all fiberglass. And then we got into rotational molding. And I'm sorry I got off track. I don't even know.
No. No, we're digging into. This has been brought up before. Do you know very many other industries where you come in, sign an agreement, do all of the work, and then invoice at the end?
Isn't that the stupidest plan?
Yeah, yeah.
It's terrible. It's putting a lot of companies out of business because the insurance companies are becoming more and more resistant to paying any bill without it being pushed to the point of a court trial. And
Well,
it's just,
and to add to it, to add to shooting ourselves in the foot, what is the common restore? There's two things, right? They show up, they say, you won't have to pay anything, right? Except for maybe your deductible, wink, wink.
right.
And then the other part of it is not communicating immediately, frequently, and constantly, and getting things in emails, for approvals. I know I had to learn that early on. An adjuster can tell you anything they want over the phone, right? You need to follow that up, get it in email. Even that's not going to be bulletproof. But what have been some of those lessons? Well, and that's the other part is everybody wants to get into large loss, right?
Right.
That's where all the money is. Well, it's also where a lot of debt is, right? You got to extend yourself. So, do you remember some of those early lessons you had to learn the hard way as far as navigating both the estimating and billing process and working with insurance companies?
Yeah, and I sure do. And we could take days with
Yeah,
all
yeah.
these horror stories,
Yep.
that we could share back and forth. I will tell you that those types of lessons are the types of lessons that we all learn when we go to our trade conventions. And
Yep.
we sit there in over a beer or a cigar or something, and we're sharing these war stories.
Yep.
And trying to figure out how our colleagues respond and handled us,
Right.
that experience if they've ever had it, and
Yep.
then we learn from each other from that, right? And so it's a powerful learning experience to sit with others who are struggling with the same challenges you are. As far as what we can do about it or what we've learned, here's what I do know is that this landscape has changed all the
Yeah.
time in
Yeah.
the last 43 years. It's never gotten to a point where, okay, this is predictable, this is what we're going to experience. Because the minute you get to that point, you go, all right, I know what I'm going to do next time. Here comes the adversary, whoever that is, whether it be the adjuster, homeowner, third-party consultant, third-party administrator, whoever it is. They come in on the job site and they throw a stick into your wheels and everything falls apart, right? And so you sit there and go like, how do I navigate that? I've done everything I could to, stay out of trouble, and yet I still find myself in trouble every single time. How do we do this business without being so, challenged on a daily basis?
Yeah.
We've got something to do.
Well, it's funny you mentioned you were one of the largest laminators. I remember reading Lloyd Weaver. He's in the Dakotas, right?
Yeah,
he
South
was
Dakota.
at one point the state's largest exporter, with their porta dryers and whatnot. So,
Oh, is that right?
and then I think his son innovated robots that go into like the HVAC systems and those kinds of things. So,
Yeah, I met his son. In fact, I asked son to sit on the water damage standard, the S500, I think. And I think he even came out to Skagit County because we had one of those meetings right out Mount Vernon.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned U-Haul. I just listened to a podcast recently and like how they started U-Haul, where they basically would like park trucks and just once someone got to a town, they'd say, hand them this postcard with the keys and we'll come pick it up. So it was all built on trust, the network, but
yeah,
that's interesting about them having the dryers. So do I get this right? You said you sold them for about 179. They took 4 hours to produce. You're paying people $10 an hour. So $40 in labor, roughly.
Well,
Not every,
well, Harlan, the designer, got $10 an hour. I'm not saying that the laminators got $10.
Yeah. So you innovated both products as well as you started, whether you set out to do it or not. I mean, you wrote the book. What was the inspiration for that? Was that just kind of helping people learn what you learned type of thing?
Well, the original inspiration was Steamback Company started doing business op shows.
Okay.
So you go to a business, they were big in those days. You go to a business op shows, you look at 200 different business opportunities.
Oh,
and for the right amount of money, you're supposed to get set up.
kind of the precursor to franchising or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And they still exist today. You can go to a business op, and maybe most of those business ops today are franchises. But Steamback Company would go and say, look, we'll give you 2 weeks of training. We'll give you some manuals. And you can get into the carpet cleaning business. And not only that, you can do restaurant, duct cleaning, carpet. You can do the carpet cleaning, upholstery cleaning, water damage. Of course, none of those guys never cleaned a carpet in their life. They never, unless they did it at home or something. And so they would all these business op people, which paid Steamback a lot of money, because like I said, I paid $12,700 for my hotel. I think these guys are paying like $30,000. But anyway, they'd come out to Linwood, Washington, and get 2 weeks of training. Well, Steamback asked me to come down and teach a one-day seminar out of that 2 weeks. And I just stand there and look dumb and talk to them for a day. And they gave me $1,000. So I thought, dude, this is hog's heaven, man.
We're eating good tonight. Yeah.
I mean, I didn't like public speaking, but $1,000, you can do about anything, right? So I would teach these guys. And then I realized at the end of the day, these guys didn't have a clue. They didn't have, I could talk till I was blue in the face. How do you take a greenhorn who's never even cleaned a carpet, never seen a water damage in their life? You're going to send them back to North Carolina, Washington, D.C., wherever. Yeah. And they're going to go into business. I mean, good luck, Yeah. And so I decided to write a book, and I literally hand wrote the first ones. Yeah. And then eventually they got typed out. And then eventually that turned into Carpet Cleaner's Guide to Water Damage. But I did it because I felt guilty for these guys. That's why I did it. Because they'd walk out the door with nothing, for me anyway. Yeah. So
try to send them with more. Well, and I think you talked about that on IAQ Radio too. Your thought was, people were charging $250. And so was it part of your marketing, part of, making it popular? You charge like what, $98 for a lot of
$98, and I kind of went down into my space, and so here's one of our
deflooding. That's right.
Yeah, deflooding. But that's one of our $98 brochures, and we would do a mailing. So this one covers like Atlanta, Richmond, New Orleans, St. Petersburg, San Francisco, San Diego, and so on. And we would do a mailing, like a 5,000 or 10,000 mailing into these areas. Here's one with, Detroit, Indianapolis, Chicago. Oh, motivators meeting too. So I became part of that, St. Paul and so on. So yeah, the $98, I had classes that were, and I didn't realize it, but they bought my book too. See, so they already, these were, I had sold thousands of those books, and so they wanted to know more, and so they paid me my $98 come to a class, and so I'd have classes that were 25, 35 people. Wow. And I'd rent a room in a hotel, a conference room kind of a thing, and give them, and then that expanded to a 2-day seminar, and then that expanded to a 3-day seminar, and then that expanded to the Center for Advanced Restorative Drawing, where we built a house inside of buildings. Yeah, and we did that big time in Burlington. Have you ever been up to our facility?
No, I haven't been up. I've always wanted to. That's always been a bigger ticket item. So and
it's so I think we were, and I think we still are. The company is the biggest water damage restoration trainer in the world. Yeah. We would have over 1,000 student days in a year, even back in the mid 80s.
What year did you build your flood house?
Yeah, I do so bad with years, but it must have been after 90. Must have been after 90.
Because
1990.
I remember reading Dr. Mike Berry said that if the industry didn't write their own water standard, the government was going to do it. And then he credits you kind of calling everybody, I believe, in 94 up to Burlington. Do you remember kind of what led up to writing or assembling that group that basically wrote the S500, right?
Yeah, well, those two things are not exactly related. Because by then I'd probably written the restorative drawing, the 470-page manual or whatever. But what I remember is I was the chairman of the water damage committee for the IICRC.
Okay.
And they had 2 meetings a year, I think, something like that. And I chaired that committee. And so I formed a committee of people I thought might know something about water damage restoration, 4, 5, 6 people, to write the first test, the first exam.
Oh, okay.
The IICRC certification exam for water damage. And I think that took a year or something like that. And it was like a multiple choice, it asked you a question, then you, and then, and that's what everybody else was doing too. Other people were writing, fire restoration and carpet cleaning and upholstery cleaning and even carpet dyeing. And there was all this activity. I mean, it was a very dynamic organization. We'd have those meetings and we might have, 70, 80 people come to an IICRC board meeting or something like that. And I never served on the board. I was just kind of there.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I was chairman of that committee and we finished our water damage test. Of course, that had to always be updated, upgraded, modified, blah, blah, blah. But I don't remember who came to me. It might have been Jeff Bishop. It might have been Larry. Oh, I can't think of Larry's last name. Cooper. Because he was president, different people were president at the time and said, kind of like, would you write the standard? It would be a natural fit, right?
Yes.
So then we started writing that standard, and it was a huge project. I mean, even though I'd written books, and I've written a lot of articles and everything else, it was just really a very difficult project, and I think it took a couple of years.
Well, getting everybody to agree on something, right, and then and then have that peer reviewed and and knowing. Well, was that part of the conversation, knowing too that this very well could be weaponized? Like being mindful of what we're writing as much as you want to train people to use something, then it also becomes something that others can, well, look at this.
I think I learned through the process. For example, I started studying ANSI standards.
Yep.
If you go to ANSI, they know a lot about standards. And if I recall, there's like prescriptive standards. And then there's another term that describes like non-prescriptive. And what happened is as we were getting into this and getting close to completion, I realized we had written a prescriptive standard to a great degree.
Yeah.
And prescriptive standards are dangerous. They're like ISO, they're like ISO standards,
Yeah.
And so I actually ended up writing the standard on writing standards. I don't know if IICRC still has that, but
the standard on writing standards.
The standards on writing IICRC standards. But anyway, that was a team effort. And I don't think we had a lot of fear, but I remember us talking about weasel words. I don't know who came up with that term, but you don't say you have to, you say you should, or you could, or you might.
Yeah.
And we use a lot of those. I use a lot of those in my daily life. I don't want to commit 100%. So I might go to the football game.
Yeah.
Or I could send you a present.
Yeah.
Well, we wrote a lot of weasel words into that thing. So maybe, I don't remember the reasoning behind all that, but maybe that was our way of being prescriptive without being prescriptive.
Yeah. Well, but you can, exactly that. It's if we don't write it, somebody else is going to write it, and then nothing's ever going to be perfect, right? And so it's gone through revisions.
Yeah, I read that in your question. I don't recall that. I don't recall that as being like, oh, we're under the gun, we better write it. I just remember in my mind we were doing something good for the industry.
Yeah.
So that was always pervasive in my mind, is what can I do to help the fellow carpet cleaner who looks just like me in a way, And
so do you recall, are there, I know this is a tall order, but are there some of the highlights that stick out in your mind over the course of, so Dri Eaz went from, we glossed over that a bit. You talk about that greater length in IAQ. You created these foam blocks. It used to be when you clean the carpet, it's wet or whatnot, you put wood blocks under the furniture, right? So it doesn't stain. And you said you had a UPS package and you cut the foam up, and then basically you're selling those for, is it $26 or $27 a sheet?
Yeah. When I read your thing, I thought, I don't remember. I thought it was maybe it was $26 or something like that, but it was in the mid-20s, and we were doing direct mail. Well, not only direct mail. Well, I think I'll get sidetracked. But how did we go from doing that to becoming Dri Eaz? Maybe that's your
Well, yeah. Just I think I found it was $27 a sheet. So
it was actually a box. So it was actually a 16-inch by 16-inch by 16-inch. It was an exact cube. And the reason I can still recall that is we designed a machine that would actually come from above. Well, first of all, you have to cut it into 2-inch slices.
Right.
So you'd hold this block that way, and then you would turn it sideways, and this machine would come down with cross hatching.
Yep.
And one swoop, and you had the box on top, and so it would load the box as it came down.
Wow.
It was all made out of wood. It was hot wires and wood.
Oh wow.
And so it was 1,024 blocks in a box. And the reason that was so popular, like you said, before that, everybody was buying, including myself, we were buying 1.5 inch by 1.5 inch by 3/4 inch wood. And you could buy that for, well, I forgot the numbers, but it wasn't expensive. But the problem is you had to pay shipping.
Yeah.
So let's say that,
yeah,
say you got 500 of these wood blocks for $20, I don't remember, but then you'd have $20 or $30 in shipping.
Yep.
So very expensive. And the other benefit of high density polystyrene at that time was we were moving furniture, and you had heavy flat based furniture. And we believed at that time that in order to clean the carpet, we need to pull that away from the wall. It might weigh 500 pounds, whatever. We'd pull it away from the wall, clean behind it, and then you had to block it up. Well, if you didn't block it up, you get a stain, a furniture stain, literally. Not just rust stains, which were easily removed, but a furniture stain. So you had to block it up. Well, you'd have these darn wood blocks on this thing, and you go to lift the other end, and they'd slide off. Well, with a high density polystyrene, they would indent enough. So so everybody was buying those.
Yeah.
It was a crazy business. I'd go to my mailbox. In those days, literally, you got checks in them.
Yep.
That's how you sold things. It's open up a stack like this, 26. Oh, an order for 2.
Yeah.
It's so, but I think your question was along the lines, how do you go from that to doing something else? And it was kind of fear-based because, you look at this product, I'm not making the raw material. Anybody can make these. I was pushing the machines. I had asked the manufacturer to push my machines to a very high density, 3-pound density, which was almost unheard of. But, and so you say, well, we're going to get knocked off and I'm not going to get checks in the mail anymore. What else can you sell? And so then I started selling the guide to water damage restoration. So I was doing national mailings by this time.
Yeah.
And so I put the book on it. I sold tons of books. Then I put hydro dryers and didn't sell any. But the reason I added those products was I really felt like the block business was kind of a dead end. And it proved to be. I mean, we actually quit making them after 5, 6, 7 years. Our volume dropped so far.
Yeah. And
there was no way to discern quality. It was very hard to discern, our foam cost a little more than maybe somebody used a 2-pound or a 2.5 pound or a 1.5. I mean, how would you know it's a foam block if it's a 1-pound density? So very hard to compete in the market with foam block. So we took a serious direction with water damage restoration once we came out with the fiberglass turbo dryer.
Yeah.
And then we said, oh, we're in this business. And so you're just going to start adding products and innovation and differences. And the other thing that made a difference is I decided that I was going to work on behalf of the professional carpet cleaners. In other words, I wanted them to be successful.
Yeah.
And I would do anything to help somebody be successful. So for example, I remember many calls on our Milgo, one of our quaternary ammonium disinfectants that we introduced. I would spend an hour on the phone talking to somebody. If that's what it took for them to feel comfortable to use our product and use it properly, I would spend a ridiculous amount of time. And so that never changed at Dri Eaz. I mean, it may have changed now, I don't really know, but you could get telephone technical support far beyond the product.
Yeah.
And so we provided education and we provided a lot of tools that you could have packaged as a franchise,
Yeah.
but we didn't.
Yeah.
For example, we even developed the pricing for water damage restoration. We developed a 200-page marketing manual on how to market your restoration services.
Yeah.
We provided all kinds of marketing tools, either for free or they could purchase to help them be successful.
That's wild. Yeah.
So it was more than just a piece of hardware.
Yeah. Well, I want to be mindful of your time. If you're up for it, there's probably a whole ton we could come back to.
Yeah.
Such a question about the symposiums and just, memories throughout. One thing I did want to kind of close on was in your IAQ interview, one of the things you mentioned, and I apologize, I'm paraphrasing, but you talked about, I believe it was you attributed to Covey, some of the principles there from Stephen Covey. But one thing that stuck out was you went from revenue sharing to profit sharing and trying to make that clearer and simple for your people. And I believe, if I remember correctly, you said, I made more after making that transition than I've ever made in my whole life. And so maybe for especially young business owners and those kinds of things, continuing what you started with, for people not quite sure how to make that transition. A lot of people struggle with, motivating people, right? And those kinds of things. So what do you recall that led up to that and how you implemented that?
Yeah. Well, I always believed that you wanted people to feel like an owner.
Yeah.
In fact, the best scenario is for them to be an owner and in a sense. So if I was starting a new business, I would try to somehow involve employees in a possibility of some kind of ownership, like an ESOP or something like that. Initially, when I started, I just needed a simple system, and I just shared a percentage of the revenue. So somebody would get 0.005% of the gross sales. And so all my employees got a piece of the gross sales, literally.
Yeah.
Well, they'd have to be there like 3 months. But so in a way, I was sharing revenues. But what happened is I was the only one in the company. As this company grew, our sales grew. I mean, we would have 20 to 50% growth rates every year. So the company this year was a different company 2 years from now. But I was the only one responsible for profit, and I wasn't making much profit, quite frankly. And I was making 4 or 5% pre-tax net. I mean, it was a struggle. And I couldn't get anybody else to care. Well, based on revenues, it doesn't matter how much you make. So eventually we changed it to literally a profit sharing program, or quarterly. So it was a floating scale. If the company made, and I forget the exact numbers, but it was like if the company made 14% pre-tax profit that quarter, they would get a 14% of their wages as a bonus that quarter.
Wow.
And then if the company only made 10%, then they would get 10% of their wages. So, and a lot of times I emphasize that because I do think about financial things quite a bit. But I was thinking about it again this morning, and I realized, I'm really not stating the bigger picture. We created a whole culture of empowerment, distributed decision-making, training. We spent hundreds of thousands of dollars in training our employees. Now you'd say, well, you're training to run a rotational molding machine. No, actually, most of our money was spent on helping people improve their personal lives. We were teaching tools like the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It doesn't teach you how to assemble a turbo dryer.
Right.
But if it improves the quality of your life, and it improves the quality of your communication with your coworkers, and and so we had these things going on all the time. And so there was a whole cultural dynamic that was going on, and the power of the mission and vision, and people need something bigger than themselves to work towards.
Yeah.
And so whatever it is, you think, well, just a manufacturing guy putting dries their dehumidifiers together on the line. Why does he care? And so you try to tie it back to, we're helping victims of water damage.
Yeah.
I mean, and we're helping our distributors earn a living, and we're helping our customers. We really thought of the end users as our customers. We're helping them make a better living. So you're impacting all these people across the world when you put those screws in that unit.
Yeah.
And that's what people need. That's what I needed. I think people don't want to just work for money.
Yeah.
you know, I think money will only work so far. So yes, we had profit sharing. We had a lot of different, it was an integrated, what we eventually developed was an integrated culture and company that started with all the stakeholders, particularly the end user customers.
Well, but that starts, you've got to build the system so that it's executed from the ground up, but whoever's at the top has to buy in, right? And
you got to walk the
their
talk.
ears open. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, you got to walk the talk. I mean, like one of our highest values was fairness. Now, fairness means that if you're we were all hourly workers, including myself. I took an hourly wage up until the very end.
Yeah.
Kind of almost forced to go with a salary type position. But everybody got time and a half and blah, 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 on overtime. But, I forgot my point. Oh, but if we start at 8, if your starting time is 8, and we had starting times. We didn't have people who could come in at 8:20.
Yeah.
Including myself. You had to walk that talk. We're treated fair. Oh, if you get an email address in the 80s, you got an email address. Everybody got an email address. That means I could mail back in the 80s. I could send an email to every employee in the company. Yeah. With my own hit on it. It wouldn't have to be translated 5 times before it got to somebody else. Right. Everybody got a 360 review. Yeah. I mean, everybody got a 360 review, including me. Yep. Yeah. So it wasn't just you didn't like your boss. Well, yeah, it's not good, but you're going to get reviewed by some other people as well on a paper format, and then you take that and you put everything together and you come up and then you do it. So everybody got annual reviews. So I mean, there's lots of things as part of that culture that works. But I would say to new startups to get people to have ownership, whether it's a piece of the stock, whether it's stock sharing, whether it's revenue sharing, whether it's profit sharing. It just changes. It changes a lot of things. Just that alone can change a lot of things.
It changes for so many people want to say that there's nowadays in the industry, there's not enough money or not enough profit. And then, well, let's look at your books and, come to find out they don't have books, so it's like, how do you know you're not making any money? Well, I think I should be making more. Based on what?
A lot of bosses aren't really up straight. I mean, we showed our P&Ls. I mean, our employees had access to our P&Ls. Yeah. And there was no games. I mean, if the owner's taking money out of the pot, if the owner's stealing money, the owner's playing games, everybody will play games. You can't get away with it. And somehow owners seem to think they can get away with this crap. No. And if you want integrity in your organization, you got to walk the talk. I mean, otherwise it won't work. Yeah. It's like the owner coming into the till in a in a grocery store or something, taking money out of the till, putting it in their pocket. Hey, next thing you know, you got all your employees taking money out of the till and putting it in their pocket. I mean, it's just the way it works,
Well, I'm sure my article in Restoration and Remediation Magazine is top of the list for you. You check it every month. First thing you read. But that's exactly where so often we hear owners saying, well, I can't get my guys to stop going to the hardware store. And then so the question is, well, what does their work order look like? And then it's like, well, what's a work order? So if you're not providing details, you can't hold people to a standard higher than what you, exactly like you're saying, than what you hold yourself to. And those things trickle down, and we always want to blame, right? It's the insurance company. It's my stinking carpenters. It's the subcontractors, so.
Yeah. Well, I would suggest people read Built to Last. And there's another book that he had, because when you start to have a vision for what a world-class company looks like, you can start to modify your own behavior if you really want it. Yeah. And that's a tool that I used, and it's something I walked and talked every day. We want to become a world-class company. That's our goal. We want to what does that look like? Yeah. And I'm like, oh, shoot, we don't know what that looks like. And so finally we discovered the Baldrige criteria. I mean, it's Baldrige criteria. It's non-prescriptive, but you have to measure. You think, oh, are your employees happier? Oh yeah, they love me. They love me. Yeah, right. Yeah, well, do an anonymous employee satisfaction survey. I mean, I think ours was 30 pages. We did them every year. I mean, it's like, oh yeah, you really find out something about employee satisfaction. Now you can measure it. Oh, you think your customers are happy? How do you know? Well, I haven't had anybody griping at me in the past month. Well,
Yeah.
they couldn't get through to you on the phone. That's why
Yeah.
they're not griping.
Yeah.
You know, so how do you, they make you measure all these different traits of what it comes to be. So we applied for the Washington State Quality Award. It was a huge thing, and it transformed our organization. It actually transformed the whole organization. We never won the national. In fact, we never were applied. We applied for the state, and we came in second in the state twice.
Yeah.
And the company's no longer doing that. I don't know why not, but it was my goal to actually win the national Baldridge Award. Not because I could care less about an award, but it was a driver.
Yeah.
The companies that win that are, at the time that they win, they're great companies. Otherwise,
You got to get all your management and leadership team in alignment, right? So
there's so much to it. I mean, there's so much to it. So how do you have a world-class carpet cleaning company? What does it even look like to have a world-class carpet clean? Or do you even care? You know? And I actually joined a manufacturers group. There was like 10 of us, and I talked about world-class company, and they thought I was crazy. And they thought I was talking about money.
Too lofty. Yeah.
They thought I was talking about world-class. Well, how much money you make? No, not. That's not world-class. That's just one measure of customer satisfaction is that your business is growing and so on. It's not that hard of it.
I always tried to, like our teams, there's two things you need to be a business. You have to have profit, right? You have to, or you're not going to. You're a charity.
That's it.
And then you have to have happy customers. And I think exactly like you're saying, too often owners, obviously or you're a manager, that's what you're responsible for. That's what you're graded on, right? But it's a bad driver to communicate to people on the front lines because they don't have as direct an input on profitability other than things like efficiency and customer service, those things that lead to that. And so when you're communicating to your team, focus on happy customers, because if you focus on happy customers, you'll find a way to be profitable. Whereas if you focus on profit, you're going to lose these people.
Exactly.
So,
you don't want to make profit the biggest driver.
Yep. Well, it just doesn't translate as much. Whereas if I can tell a guy, hey, I need you to go to the hardware store less because that's you on the job more, customers happier, we're actually productive, how can we help you do that? Well, I need better details. Okay. No, it's your fault, so.
How big is the organization you work for?
Our team, let's see, we have 3 in-house carpenters. Right now we only do Recon, the company that I'm currently with.
Okay.
And we do a lot of subcontractor work. And so.
Okay. So you kind of manage the overall job.
So that's we're I just signed on with this particular company. And so we're implementing a lot of those systems and trying to get it world-class, like you said. So, so we can make that money, right?
well, there's a lot of satisfaction in having a great company and working in a great company and doing great things.
Yep.
It's
and being known for it. And having a good reputation in the community. So, Claude, I want to be, like I said, respectful of your time. I'd love to set up a follow-up with you in the future if you're up.
Oh, sure. Yeah, you betcha.
And then so please, if you're listening, our tens of listeners, watchers, you got the IQ radio. I should have had the episode noted. Claude's on there. And then Pete Consigli wrote a very great article where you're listed as one of the founding fathers of the industry. And so definitely recommend people read that. And so thank you, Claude.
Thank you. It's been fun, John.
All right. We'll see you on a pickleball court.
Or somewhere. Take care.
Thank you. Bye. Again, I'm blown away. We're on a really good streak. Claude Blackburn, Dri Eaz. I don't know how you could not be encouraged hearing his story, of just struggling and finding a way to make it happen in the early days. We all see the giant that Dri Eaz is now, and I believe it's a part of the Legends brand now. But because Claude sold in 2006, I think I said in the opening. So, but just you always see the end story, the success, and it's cool to hear some of those in between stories, and also what Claude's doing in retirement, to try to, like he said, make his money do good things. And so just a real encouraging story, and a fun interview for me. As I said, I've been trying to make more of a focus on the history. I really want to encourage modern restorers. If you're new to the industry, look up some of these names. Got opportunities. The Restoration Industry Association is having their 75th, I believe. So that's going to be June in Florida. It's Kissimmee, which is like outside of Orlando or whatever. And so, that's going to be a great opportunity. Ken Larson mentioned that on the last podcast, great opportunity to meet some of the still living industry legends, the guys that took it from, carpet cleaning and construction and developed the industry into, what it is. And like Ken said on last podcast about, still trying to, mold it into what it should be. And so, Claude's huge in that Dri Eaz has made an indelible impression, but also, Pete Consigli in that Founding Fathers article brought up, so that's the Founding Fathers article from 2007, CNR Magazine, which is a magazine of Restoration Industry Association, but you can find that online. I'll link to it in the show notes. But his company mastered the skill of selling by providing low-cost seminars, and Claude was sometimes mocked for pricing his seminars under $100. I believe, whether it was in this article or another, at the time they were like $250 a pop. So, but he knew exactly what he was doing. He consistently played to packed rooms, while the attendees of other seminars dropped off. Under Claude's innovative pioneering, Dri Eaz pushed the envelope in the decades of the 80s and the 90s. And so I believe Claude mentioned that in our talk, it's one thing to have the technology and, some of those early, as they're formulating, pre-S500 from the IICRC and those kinds of things. Your trainers were writing their own manuals, and then like Ken talks about, coming to a consensus, and whether that's always the best thing, it's a work in progress, right? So just interesting stuff. If you're in this industry, it behooves you to know where we came from. And it's also very interesting to know that a lot of the conversation that happens over the years, discussions, disputes, those kinds of things are still being had, so there's nothing new under the sun, right? So, but yeah, I'm hoping to go to RIA in June. I know we're going to have a representative from the experience. They're coming up in April. John Downey's doing some really good stuff with Siri. He's going to be coming on to talk about that too. So stay tuned. I want to mention, I mentioned the Service Master Story, a book that I've read. Al Ersman's coming on February 11th to talk about that book. The book I'm currently reading by Bill Wilson, When Worlds Collide, Resolving Insurance Coverage and Claims Disputes. I want to be clear. I don't know that this is necessarily the book that you need to read so that somehow you become a claims interpretation expert. This really, I do believe Bill's intent is for agents to understand the product that they're selling and then how to help their clients when claims are in dispute. What did David Princeton call them? Doubtful and disputed. So David Princeton will be joining us. He is a public adjuster licensed claims advocate. His company's Advocate Claim Service, and so we're gonna, attack that from multiple points of view. So, and Andy McCabe. So David's been on most recently the podcast episode 35 and 32, and we kind of grilled him on, what is that line? Me and Brian grilled him on what is that line between when you're stepping over the line of trying to interpret policy or negotiating And Andy McCabe shared about lessons learned the hard way on episode 37 of the DYOJO podcast when he got called out by the Oregon Insurance Board. So, but one thing I'll read from Bill's book is, why do you need this book? Many claims are denied. Why? There are probably 4 basic reasons. 1, they're not covered, or there is no legal liability for the loss. 2, there's a legitimate difference of opinion on coverage. 3, one party is committing material misrepresentation or fraud. Or 4, cranial inversion, medically craniotitis rectal inversio. So Bill talks about all too often they arise from ignorance stemming from substandard or no education, or the failure or inability to read with comprehension what the policy form actually says. That being said, most coverage disputes likely arise from legitimate differences of opinion about the intent of policy language or the proper way to interpret it. So this book is designed to present a structured approach to insurance policy interpretation, claims negotiation, and dispute resolution, focusing on policy provisions that are often the source of conflict or litigation. So my base understanding of this, so as it comes to insurance policy interpretation, I don't think that's an area that property restoration contractors need to be involved in. Claims negotiation, if we're talking scope, it gets gray, right? If we're talking cost, Chip Merlin, I actually recently had to send that to an adjuster, said, I think what you're asking me to do is negotiate cost, and I'm not legally, I don't legally feel comfortable doing that, so I can reference that article. And then dispute resolution, I think that helps all of us. So I think this book for a restorer will help you kind of understand the background that leads up to the claims process. If you've got agents you work with, this might be a great book to hand out to them to say, hey, you guys, if an agent, I feel strongly about this because I've been affected by it, but if an agent's not going to go to bat for you when you need the friggin' policy to work, there's no reason to not be, dealing with the online, the Geicos, the Progressives, and those kinds of things, because there's no representation. So agents need to understand what they're selling. Adjusters, need to understand as well. This is great. Bill signed it. RTFP, read the friggin' policy, right? Wink, wink. So I think it's very good for us to understand. If you're trying to weaponize this, I'd be very, very careful, because you're probably going into areas that you shouldn't be going into as a contractor. So let the structure, Ken says, let the structure, Ken Larson, our guest last time, let the structure speak for itself. We want to communicate scope to help restore the client to pre-loss conditions. If you're entertaining discussions outside of that, you might want to bring in a professional, or reference your client to this book. David Princeton, who's been on here, and others like him. There's names in there. Bill Wilson, obviously, is somebody that can help review claims, those kinds of things. Chip Merlin's been, a bad faith lawyer that's been vocal in our industry. Ed Cross is a vocal lawyer in our industry, but that's more representing contractors when they have issues, if I understand that correctly. So claims dispute isn't necessarily his purview unless you're being sued as a contractor. So anyways, I hope you understand. Great information. Trying to line you up with people that can help. I do want to bridge. We've got all this wisdom, and there's still people around that can share, stories from the past, battles that have already been fought. And so, try to shorten your dang learning curve by not trying to make the same mistakes that have already been made by people, right? Let's make some new mistakes. Let's make our own mistakes. Who do we got coming up? I have this pulled up. We've got Bill Wilson will be next on the 4th, which will be a live recording, and David Princeton's going to be joining us for that. We'll be talking about his book, When Worlds Collide. Al Erzman, The Service Master Story, Navigating the Tension Between Profit and People. He'll be live February 11th. I'm looking to do a virtual book signing with the authors of Be Intentional Culture. So we're shooting for Saturday, February 20th at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So all of this you can see on the website, thedyojo.com/listen is the podcast website. So keep up to date there. If you got questions, suggestions, yada, yada, yada. The lives go through YouTube. They broadcast to LinkedIn and Facebook. What's odd about the platform we're using, if you comment on LinkedIn, it populates into the program. I noticed last time a few people commented on Facebook and it didn't populate. So we'll work out the bugs. As you know, we're real technically savvy here at the DYOJO podcast.
This is the stupidest thing I've ever heard.